Speaker, and I think it would be inappropriate to commence the sitting today without expressing our concern and condolences to the loss of hundreds of thousands of hectares of livestock and farming land in South Africa in the Free State. And we certainly let our thoughts and prayers be with all of those who are suffering at this time. But we're here today to debate the economic reconstruction and recovery plan announced by the President last week. But before we get too far into this, it's important that we clear up one very crucial misconception that has somehow found its way into the language of this debate. We're not trying to recover from the coronavirus pandemic, as has been repeatedly claimed. COVID-19 did not destroy our economy. We're trying to recover from decades of bad governance and poor ANC policy. And it is disingenuous and extremely opportunistic to try and claim otherwise. Our economy was in recession. More than 10 million South Africans couldn't find work. And we'd already been relegated to junk status long before anyone had heard of the word coronavirus. And when the virus did arrive, it wasn't the pandemic that worsened our situation. It was the heavy-handed response by government, the hardest, longest, most unscientific lockdown in the world. That is what closed down factories. That is what closed down restaurants, retailers, and thousands of other businesses. And that is what has destroyed our tourism industry. So let us approach this debate on the economic reconstruction and recovery plan with that truth in the back of our minds. But here is the other problem. This isn't a plan. A plan has a list of steps. A plan has details of resource allocation, deliverables, and timelines. This has none of these. It is a wish list of worthy intentions. This is a letter to Santa. This doesn't mean it's all bad, and it's in the plan. The auctioning of spectrum to bring down data costs is one of them. But this should have happened a long, long time ago. And this is not the first time it's been promised. Make it happen. Similarly, reforms to Eskom and the opening of the energy market to more independent power producers are long overdue. You've listed this in your plan. Now let's make it happen. Extending the COVID grant is also a welcome inclusion. This is a necessary stopgap for desperately poor South Africans. But there's also a lot that's missing in the plan, and none more important than the reforms to our labor legislation. This is the most taboo topic in the tripartite alliance. We will not reverse our unemployment trend in South Africa until we make our labor market far more flexible. And everybody in this house knows that. Staying with jobs, the 100,000 opportunities in the public sector is not the solution we need either. And particularly not when the same plan speaks of cutting the public sector wage bill. Even for a letter to Santa, this makes absolutely no sense. Meaningful, permanent jobs can only be created by the private sector. And that is where our stimulus and focus must lie. This plan should have also pulled the plug on bailouts to state-owned enterprises, and particularly the failed SAA. And it should have addressed our spiraling national debt with a practical debt stabilization plan. We can go on like this all day, listing the good, the bad, and the missing. But until we address the actual implementation of these things, we're just going through the motions. We're dancing in the dark. And we've been through these motions countless times in this very house, listening to a president or a finance minister wishing out loud from the latest plan, promise, or manifesto. Year after year, we've heard how unemployment numbers will be halved, how 5 million jobs will be added in 10 years, how 6 million jobs will be added in 5 years. These were all magic numbers pulled from magic hats. We all know that none of these things happened. No matter what the new promise was, the critical stats just continued moving in the wrong direction. There's always a vast chasm between goals and implementation, and there are important reasons for this. Our incapable state is one of them, and we've got to fix this by abandoning cadre deployment in favor of a true meritocracy. Systemic government corruption is another. We can fix this by going hard after the corrupt and reaching very hard into the benches of parliament and into the governing party to solve this. But the biggest reason for this gap between talk and action is going to be the hardest for the president to solve. And that reason is that the ANC itself is forever opposed to its own plans. The enemies of growth and the blockers of reform are not some outside force. They don't sit in the opposition benches here, Mr. President. They sit all around you in your own party. Every single time someone in your government has stood up with a proposal for meaningful reform, they've been dragged back down and neutralized by their own comrades. And you just need to ask your finance minister. He will tell you all about that. You are surrounded by people who are ideologically incompatible with the reforms needed to kickstart growth in our economy. People who are wedded to an economic system that has never worked. People who think that states should own all property, steer the economy, and control every aspect of people's lives. People who genuinely believe that businesses and employers are somehow the enemy. People who have convinced themselves that it is more noble for someone to go jobless and hungry than work for a wage that doesn't meet their threshold of minimum. People who think that paying out 17 million social grants is somehow a huge government success story and not a shameful indictment of the government's inability to deliver dignity through employment. These are the enemies of growth, Mr. President, and they sit all around you. But there is a way around this. There's a way to sidestep the enemies of growth and get your reform agenda passed. Bring them to the House, Mr. President, and we will help you to pass them. Tuma mina, you told us back when you stood here at the start of your president. Send me. Well, now it's our turn to return the favor. Send us, Mr. President. Let's use our combined numbers to push through labor reforms, energy reforms, fiscal reforms. Let's do what we all know is in the best interests of South Africa, even if it means going against your colleagues. Between those in your benches who believe in the power of economic reforms and the members here in my benches, we can have a majority. We can pass any reform we like in this House. On your own, you don't have much of a hand to play, which is why you're going to be locked in a stalemate. But if you let us help you pass these reforms, you can forget about the aces and the jokers. You won't need them. You will have a winning hand. Let that be your legacy, Mr. President, the president who finally chose to put his country before his party. Thank you, Madam Speaker.